for a way to get to safety. It always works out well for Bitcoin. I believe that was the beginning. It makes things worse that Larry said the same thing around the same time that the banks turned around. I'm not sure if there was any business news that day, but there was probably something else going on as well. Pal has been an Ether bull since he bought the biggest altcoin years ago. He is the founder and CEO of Real Vision. Pal, like many early crypto users, put money into Bitcoin. 10 years later, when he had made 10 times his original investment, he sold his Bitcoin holdings. Pal says that the best choice is Ether because of its network effects. He also believes that Bitcoin has been unwilling to change, but the biggest altcoin has been willing to try new things. This is what made it more famous and widely used 2 years ago. Pal said that everything in the DeFi NFT community, tokens and metaverse worlds is priced in Ether, even the time of creators and other things. It will soon be the money of the digital world, and Bitcoin is a great way to back it up. Paul still has some Bitcoin, but he has more money put in Ether because he thinks it will be a big deal when the next bull market starts. Pal told Crypt about his thoughts on the Bitcoin business. He thinks that Ether and Solana will have bigger news stories and upswings in 2024. He likes how well the Bitcoin ETF has been received. In the interview, Pal talks about a key price level that could cause the price of Ether to skyrocket. If you don't want to miss Pal's important information, watch the whole movie. Send likes, share, and follow to get more videos like this. Thanks and have fun with the movie. I agree with you, which means that we'll be surprised by something else interesting that we hadn't thought of the Solana of this cycle. What are you going to do? I'm not good enough to choose those. You pick up the smaller things better. It's so much easier with this kind of broad bet because it's so fucking clear. It got through a tough time, it goes off. The technology keeps getting a lot better. The neighborhood is nice. The only story about Solana is really good. Tolly is one of the most intelligent people in the space. You think, okay, this is it, looks like the best bet possible. That's one side of saying you're better than me. The other side is that I end up with shame in my pocket. Out of everything I bought, it's fine. It's like a venture capital fund. You never know what will work or what won't. I've got a lot of shame in different wallets because I never had any of those fly. Around the time Larry said what he said, the markets were beginning to realize that the real issue was the release of too many notes, and that inflation wasn't going up, but bond rates were. From that point on, gold and cryptocurrency prices went up very quickly. This is because as bond yields went up, so did their prices. The link between them changed. There was a link between the two because the market thought that if bond prices kept going up like this, the Fed, the government, or someone else would step in. As you get closer to the cowbell, the trigger or the thing that will happen, someone will do something. I believe that was a major cause and things began to move quickly. If you don't want this bond market to get out of hand, you should go hide somewhere. Also, if you remember, the banks had started to fail again. Yes, I think they started to break down a bit during that time. I need to check the date. It must be about the same. October 16th, the banks hit a small high point and then dropped like a stone. To sum up, the market's job is to guess how likely it is that there will be relief or a flight to safety. It always works out well for Bitcoin. I believe that was the beginning. It makes things worse that Larry said the same thing around the same time that the banks turned around. I'm not sure if there was any business news that day, but there was probably something else going on as well. The problem is that loan rates are way too high. To cover the shortfalls, they have to issue ongoing bonds. However, they have to roll over bonds from the last 4 years, from 3 to 4 years ago, during the pandemic cycle, when interest rates went from 1% to 5%, or 5.5 years. The trouble is that you have to issue in order to do that. To pay for that, we need even more loans. It seems like a lot of issues are coming in. One of the things I've said about the Everything Code is that governments can't sell bonds with 5% interest if they owe the whole GDP. There isn't enough economic growth to cover it. That means the bank has to buy it. In this case, we are trying to get the central bank to buy it. Now, Jay, you're going to have to take this whether Janet is doing that on purpose or not. It's more like, okay, let's show the stress, let's make the stress, we need to cut rates. We can roll this debt at lower levels to play this game. We can also put it on the Fed's balance sheet if we can come up with a good reason. Like a slowdown. This Ether chart was shared by Pal on Twitter before the interview. Pal called it a beautiful chart. The chart shows a nearly complete Elliott wave pattern. This is a way to look at price patterns that are linked to changes in how buyers feel and think. Elliott's wave theory says that there are two kinds of waves: impulse waves that set up a pattern and correction waves that go against the stronger trend. Powell's image shows that Ether has had two waves that go up and its own waves that go down. This means that the last part of the pattern is coming up the third upward wave, which is usually bigger than the first two. Powell thinks that the price of an Ether token could go as high as $3,200. This wave will come after a short rise above $1,900. As they talk, he also shares his general thoughts on the economy and explains why the market for cryptocurrencies has recently become more open. Larry Thinking, the CEO of BlackRock, said on October 16th that investors are using coins like Bitcoin as a flight to quality. The former Goldman Sachs executive brings this up. Right about what they did in the last cycle, they shared the chance to issue 20-year debt. 30 years of debt, 10 years of debt, yes. They did short-term loans. And they've been doing this the whole time. This is what I've been talking about when I talk about the economic cycle. For example, in 2008, everyone had a get out of jail free card with no interest rates. That meant no one had to pay interest on their loan. That was like getting a gift, right? No interest rates, every government return was $0. But for some reason, they did it for 3 to 5 years. We keep going back and forth between 3 and 5 years of debt. It's the perfect cycle of Bitcoin halves. That's exactly the business cycle. It's exactly election time in the US. All of them are the same. It's this everything code and this super cycle. Now is the time in the cycle when the balance sheet should start going up to pay off the bills from the last cycle. So this is the idea, okay, M2 around the world is now positive. It's like taking the foot off of a beach ball when its rate of change goes above zero. That's what I've always said. It goes up really quickly because these things want to go up. Japan and China aren't the only ones who worked on the M2 figure, right? This is the world's M2. The result is that global M2 is going up and will keep going up. The work we do at GMI looks a long way ahead. That's what made us very optimistic and make us bet more on cryptocurrencies at the end of last year. It's because money was getting easier to get. We thought, okay, this is cool, it's on the next chart down then. This shows that Bitcoin did better than the Nasdaq versus Global too. I'm going to call this the giant black hole now. This is the time when you should only own crypto because it starts to do better than everything else. And that always ends up being interesting. Now let's move on. As that process slowly comes to an end, we've seen what happens in Europe. Thousands of banks have gone out of business or merged with other banks. The US banking system will keep getting smaller over time. These days, there are huge banks that the government backs up. For this reason, they made banks that were too big to fail. What does that mean? All of them can fail. It doesn't bother us. Oh no. Okay. That way, you have power over all the people who have money in the system, because there isn't a bank manager in Ohio telling you who can borrow money. No, the government controls and decides what JP Morgan does. There are a lot of new features coming out, but everyone now has